Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. We normally have a Munster and Irish legend with us in Alan Quinlan, but we've gone for the upgrade today with a certain Peter O'Mahony.
Serious upgrade.
Serious upgrade. Peter, welcome along to the Virgin Media Studios.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm very good. Very good, thank you, yeah.
I suppose we must touch on straight away last night. What was it like to you watching it from the sofa and the couch?
Yeah, look, it was different. It was difficult. I went to all the November games, and obviously it was my first time being back in Lansdowne Road, and being at an anthem that I wasn't out there in a jersey, and it was definitely a strange feeling. I got a weird kind of dose of nerves, but look, I suppose that's normal. And last night was difficult and different from many ways. Obviously, not being there for Six Nations for the first time in a long time. Missing occasions like that. Standing in Stade de France and preparing for an occasion like that is why you play the game. Is to have moments like that, and then look, the result didn't go the way the lads would have planned. But again, there was lots of positives. There's lots of stuff they're going to have to work on. You know what I mean? And they're going to be been lucky enough to work with a lot of the people in there, the coaches and stuff, the players. They're an honest group, and they'll get stuck into the review. And it's one side I don't miss is the feeling after a game like that. That certainly from my point of view, I used to feel like you let the people who mean a lot to you down, and that hurts. So there'll be a group of guys there who are hurting more than anyone in the country coming back home today, and it's a tough place to be.
Do you still feel very attached to that jersey? And what's retirement like being with the gardening and the non-alcoholic beer, if I'm correct?
I still feel very attached. It's not that long ago that I finished, and it's kind of strange. I still feel attached to the group in some ways, but I'm not, and I have to realise that. And look, I took the first kind of 5 months off. I was a long time playing the game. Luckily at a very high level, competing with people at a high level, and it's a stressful job. I'll be the first to admit it, and it was nice to be able to unwind and have a proper summer off, and do a couple of trips away that I couldn't normally do, and have some downtime, and kind of push things down to January, and then January kind of got mental. But it's good to be busy. As you said, I've kicking off an alcohol 0.0 brand, Active Brewing, and that's been busy the last couple of months. Nearly there with that, and stuck into things that I'm interested in, because I've had a job for a long time that I've loved, and I want to do something that I enjoy and love after the fact, albeit very different.
What's this weather doing to the garden? Is it keeping you up at night instead of the Irish selection?
It's wrecked the place, isn't it? And look, some people have been affected a lot worse than others, unfortunately. Homes and businesses are destroyed, so it's a very serious matter. But from a gardening point of view, it definitely isn't. It definitely isn't ideal. But look, Irish weather is what it is, and we get hammered every year, but it always seems to be resilient and bounce back.
Did your love for that, if I'm right, come from your mother's grandmother? Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. It was a big aspect of it. She had a small garden right in the middle of Cork City. You never thought it was there, and I remember days the gardener coming over when she wasn't when he used to come over and give her a hand, and I really excited, and remember the smells and the hard work he used to say. But he used to allow me use the sharp tools every now and then, and I loved it, and I love the physical aspect to it. I like getting out and about and getting stuck into jobs, and seeing the rewards afterwards is it's a very nice thing to have.
If we bring it back to the rugby, because we could be here all day talking about your career, 114 Irish caps, countless championships, couple of Grand Slams, Lions, everything. Peter, have you had a moment over the last 9 months or whatever to think, I should be very proud of what I've achieved?
Yeah, I have, and you don't spend a lot of time doing it, and it's very difficult to do when you're in the game. Especially the modern game, you're on to the next job, and whether you win, lose, or draw, there's a job to be done the following week these days. There's very few down periods, and you're always looking forward, and certainly days, you look back on very fondly. You look back on the tough days. You know what I mean? That kind of, I suppose, made me as a person probably more so than the good days was the tough days, and I consider myself hugely lucky to have been around at the same time that I spent lots of time played alongside some of the best rugby players to ever play the game. Not to mind playing Ireland, and to compete and train with them, to play alongside these kind of people. I consider myself very lucky.
Favourite moments? 2018, 2023?
Yeah,
absolutely. Maybe it was in Belfast whenever you made your debut.
First cap for Munster up there. Yeah, was a good day. My old fella driving up and coming on for Quinny actually. Taking a seat now. Yeah. So that was certainly a good day. Yeah, look, you mentioned 18 and 23 were very, very, very proud moments for me. Lifting the trophy in 24 was very special. Lifting a URC title for Munster was a very special moment for me. But to be honest, the day-to-day enjoyment of hanging around with your buddies, you know what I mean? 6 days a week, sometimes 7, was the part that I missed the most and I enjoyed the most, was the crack and, the camaraderie and the friends you make, for life, and the people you come across. That's what made it special for me.
It's funny, even the question before you answered, you still talk about the difficult days makes you as a person. Why is that instead of basking in the glory as well?
Yeah, look, I think if you've nothing but glory, you're going to end up half useless, to be honest. You know what I mean? And you're not going to get there.
I haven't had any glory, Peter.
It's all in perspective, isn't it? I've always felt that hardship, it really makes up what you're about, and I think it makes the good days all the sweeter. You know what I mean? And I had plenty more days than I had good, but as a result, the good days were really good, and worked hard. I got a few bumps of the ball. I was lucky, as I said, with the people I played with, and I have lots of regrets and stuff I'd go back and change, but that's again all part of me and the package I am now.
Do you have a lot of regrets too?
Yeah, I do of course. And
any in particular?
I've too many to start listing off here, and if you talk to anyone in sport who says they've no regrets, they're lying to you.
Okay.
I think that's bullshit. There's games I go back over that I'd have done things differently. There's things I would have said or not said. There's things that I would have done differently, and that's the fact of life. That's something you got to own, and again is part of what forges you.
It's funny, listen to you now. You're pretty open there, and you speak. See, going into interview you as a player, I was fearful. I never know what you were going to say to me, Peter.
I don't know about that.
I think that's good to have that edge.
Yeah, and look, that was me, and I always was very protective of my teams and my teammates. I was very protective of what we had, the relationships that we had. If people were talking bad, I would take offence. You know what I mean? I would. I'd never have a problem giving my opinion, but lots of the times, my opinion was for people who were in my immediate vicinity that had an effect on my life, and outside of that, I was quite selfish with everything outside of that, and that's the way it had to be for me to make things work. And again, would have changed some of it maybe, but that was me, and that's the way I had to deal with things.
Did you learn so much in your career for stuff like that from Paulie, Rog, plenty of others, Axel, maybe Quinny as well, those guys?
I did. I was very lucky. I always speak about the Cork On teams that I followed, the Munster team, the Irish team. Particularly my club, was the first team that I, followed die-hard, like proper die-hard. Munster soon came afterwards, and Ireland, was always the pinnacle. And the people that I was following were real role models for me. Even starting in Con with the team that was there, a lot of it was the Munster team, but, the Donnaghas, the Mickos, clubmen as well, Jerry Murray's, Ultan O'Callaghan's, these kind of people. Brian O'Mara was there, Raj was there, Frankie, Philip Soden I met in Con Saturday, and you're going full circle meeting the fellas you were supporting years ago with for a point all of a sudden now in the club when you're retired. And then on to Munster, you mentioned Paul and Raj, who I would have looked up to from a young age and then played alongside. The Dennis Leamys of this world, Axel, that was a huge influence from someone who I looked up to when he was playing, to someone who was a mentor and a coach. So I didn't have to go too far to look for someone to have as a role model. I was very lucky to have all these people at my doorstep.
For so long, probably what drives you to get out of bed was playing rugby for Ireland and Munster. What about now? What drives you to get up and go?
What drives me is, I think my family has always been the main driver and the main driving force. I've Jess and my 3 kids at home. My family circle, the wider circle, that is the most important thing at the moment, and has always been, not at the moment and will always be. That's the thing that has always driven me, be it for rugby or differently. And look, I've always been busy, since I've started in the Munster Academy to, the day I finished rugby was a busy period. There was not a lot of downtime, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the schedule, I enjoyed the hard work, and I want to continue that. As I said, I took some time off, but I like being busy. I've lots of interests and things I enjoy, so hopefully I can marry the two of them up.
Any future line-out colours and back rowers in the Peter O'Mahony family coming up?
Yeah, I don't know. The two boys
are they into it?
They love it, and they're back up in Con, and they're loving it. The smallest fella has the boots ready the night before, and they both love it. My eldest is Indy. She's 9 and she's sports fanatic as well. Okay. She's not playing rugby, but she's playing nearly everything else. And look, again, they're what drive me. They're it's great to see them out and about and training and enjoying sports and getting stuck into school. It's amazing seeing them growing up, and I'm enjoying that.
How's the school run?
School run is challenging at times. The run itself is handy. It's getting them out the door is the problem. I took a lot of that stuff for granted before I finished playing, and I don't really know how my very good wife did it for a long time with me being gone for 4, 5, 6 days a week at times, months at a go potentially. So I've a newfound respect for the school run and all those other very difficult jobs that she had to deal with on her Todd for a lot of it.
If we bring it back to the present day and just what's happened with Ireland, they won the Grand Slam in 23, then your captaincy in 24 in the Championship, nearly a touch of the ball away from a World Cup semi-final. And now from the outside after last night, it seems, what I know, but Ireland are maybe digressing and going a wee bit backwards. Yes, the likes of yourself, Kane, Johnny, Earlsy, they've all stepped aside. How difficult is it for this group, and you've maybe been there coming through after your debut in 2012, how can they get back there, Peter?
I think they have to believe in themselves, they have to believe in their ability, they have to believe in the group they have around them, the management staff, and they have a world-class team around them. They've got to be tight as a group, you know what I mean? They've got to really, they got to fight their corner. You know what I mean? They've got to stand up and own it, and they've people there who can do it. They've the coaches there who can show them the way. They got to go and grab it, and they got to go and love it while they're doing it. You know what I mean? And there'll be tough times along the way. You know, that's sport. That's what you do. That's part and parcel of it. You get knocked down, but you own it. You're honest. You know, you take it on the chin, and you endeavour to get better. That's what sport is about. And you know, we're so lucky with, you know, the quality of player that we have today. You know, over the years we've had, you know, really, really world-class players, and it's no different now. You know, as you said, you've had some guys with a lot of experience step away from the game, but we've all went through those periods, you know, even around, 13, 14, 15, when, you know, when I started playing, the Brian O'Driscolls, the O'Garas, the O'Connells were finishing up around, you know, those times. And you know, you need to plan. You need guys to stand up and grab it by the throat, and I've no doubt we have people there to do it. And at the same time, I'm very optimistic. You know what I mean?
So maybe when we say transitional period, you're like, no, I'm still optimistic. This group is good enough to fire again.
Yeah, I do. I've huge belief in them. I've been around them. Luckily, as I said, I consider myself very lucky to have spent a lot of time with that group. And you know, the main thing and the most important thing, I think, is they're an honest group, and they're good people, and they're high quality athletes and rugby players. And you know, that's a great dynamic to have. They've got to go and grab it and believe in themselves, but you know, I think they have all the ability in the world.
Are you still in touch with the group? Is Keelan still on the phone? Is Andy still on the phone?
Look, they were very kind to the last game. You know it was a tough one for them against South Africa. Invited me back for a few drinks to the reception afterwards, and you know, caught up with Andy and briefly, and I'd speak to Keelan a bit, and you know, every now and then, if he knows, I'm always at the end of the phone if there's ever a bit of advice. Above all, I'm good friends with a lot of these guys, you know what I mean, and you know, we meet up. You know, if you're in Dublin, or they never seem to venture to Cork, to be honest. I always have to.
Do you
meet
blame
in
them?
Dublin.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Would they come to Belfast? No, they wouldn't.
I'll hope that was a joke anyway. But you're
to start a good
giggling
food here,
nervously all of a
Peter,
sudden. No, but I'm very lucky. I've good friends from rugby, and consider that group a very close part of my life.
Is coaching for Peter O'Mahony?
No, it's not at the moment. I've seen what it takes to be the best. I've been coached by the best, and it's a really serious commitment time-wise. More importantly than anything, obviously you need work ethic, you need a huge knowledge of the game, you need to be a real student, and you need to be prepared to travel, you need to be prepared to put a huge amount of time commitment to it, and that's not something I'm prepared to do at the moment. I was away from home a lot. You know, I spend lots of time in hotels and away from home, and you know, my priority is spending more time in Cork and you know, being around home at the moment, and that's priority. Do
you have to be selfish to be the best, Peter?
You do, absolutely, and again, whoever says you don't have to be is lying to you. You know, it's sport is selfish. You know, okay. Sport is ruthless and selfish, and you know, that has to make up, you know, a part of you as a professional athlete, whether you're playing badminton or rugby, you know, golf, tennis. There has to be a ruthless element. There has to be a selfish element, and you know, for some people that's hard. You know, some people it comes easier to them than others. You know, it affects people outside of yourself. You know, it's tough on other people. You know, I spoke about how much I was away. You know, it can be tough on people at home. It can be tough on kids. You know, and they're all well and good when they're 9 months and they don't know the concept of time. But when you're telling an 8 or 9 year old that I'm gone for a month, I might see it 2 or 3 days maybe in the month. You know, it gets difficult on them. So it's a selfish profession, but at the same time, you know, you have a lot of responsibility. You're representing your people, your family, obviously, but in my case, my province, my county, and my country, I was lucky enough to represent, and that with that comes responsibility, and something I always really enjoyed and was prepared to sacrifice for.
So no full-time coaching, but for the game gives so much to you for 15, 20 years. Do you feel at some stage, in some way, you'll give it back, and maybe it's a mentorship role? Or
Yeah, I'm doing a bit of that. I don't, rugby gave me a lot. I feel I gave a lot to rugby. I don't feel like I owe the game anything.
Okay.
Which is, I think, a good way to be. As I said, I consider myself incredibly lucky, but at the same time, I gave a lot to the game. However, I do enjoy, talking to academy guys. I do enjoy, there's a few of them will pick up the phone to me or will have a coffee. I've done 2 kind of, I suppose, very informal chats with the Munster Academy about, my experiences, some leadership stuff, some stuff that I feel helped me, that maybe, the room might pick up 1 or 2 small things. I've made plenty of mistakes in my career that, if I can share a couple of small things with guys, that they might not have to make the same mistakes. And I enjoy that. It's nice to keep a link,
Okay.
Munster is very close to my heart, and it's nice to keep a link there. And, I enjoy, helping the younger generation and passing on a bit of experience.
Do you think, you say Munster's so close to your heart, do you think Irish rugby's in a good place?
I do think it is. Yep, I think it's well governed. Rugby in general is in a tough area, tough space. You're fighting for viewership. You're fighting for lots of things. You're fighting for, numbers at underage level. You're competing with, the Limerick hurling teams. The Corkers, the footballers. The soccer teams. You're competing with all these sports, trying to get young kids to play the game, and that's what is going to grow any game in any part of the world is young people taking up the sport. And I think the numbers are okay there. You know what I mean? I think we can always push to be better, and I think the game is in a strange place. It's getting really professional. It's getting really, I mean, that sounds silly, but even when I started playing, there was weeks off every now and then. I think for an international rugby player, with the way the scheduling has gone, with the way TV wants them on the TV at all times, there used to be weeks where you could get a shot. The 11 World Cup, there was a big group of kind of my age group, my Munster Academy got a shot playing for Munster at that, while the lads were away at the World Cup. Naturally, we had 10 or 11 guys or more who were gone, but the schedule, the Celtic League or whatever it's called at the time, just continued on. It started maybe a week or 2 later, and it just continued on. So we got 6 games before the guys came back, between their break off and the World Cup itself. We got 6 games, we won 5 of them, and it was a real baptism of fire for a big group of guys around my age at that time. Guys don't get that anymore. You look during November now, it's you might get 1 game in November in a club setting. 6 Nations, you might have 2 games, whereas there would have been 4 or 5 played when I was younger. And again, you would have got your opportunity. You would have been penciling in the diary saying, look, I'm going to be ready, but I know if I don't get a shot, I'll get a go when they're gone. And TV now, they want to see, the Tyke Burns, the Caelan Dorrises, the Jacob Stockdales, these guys who are playing with the Irish team. They want to see them playing in a provincial jersey, so they don't want a clash there. So I find that difficult, from a planning point of view, from a blooding a new player point of view. So look, there's obstacles to overcome, but to answer a question very long-winded, I think Irish rugby is in a good place. I think it needs to stay ahead. I think it needs to keep on top of things. There's stuff that needs to be sorted out, but as I said, my outlook on rugby in Ireland is very positive.
And a last one on that. I know yesterday was different, but maybe in your time, or for a couple of years, obviously more players in Dublin. Were you against, or did you think there was ever a problem with too many maybe blue shirts or Leinster jerseys in the Irish team?
No, I didn't.
Can you see why people might have thought that?
Well, you look at the facts of it is the majority of the country, or a vast majority, or a huge chunk of the country live in Dublin. You know what I mean? Be it for work, be it for, for lots of reasons. You know what I mean? The capital city of our country is Dublin, and as a result, there's 1.567 million people, maybe more, live in the vicinity of it. So the fact of the matter is, you're going to have more people playing the game there. You're going to have more schools there. You're going to have more schools who are into rugby there. As a result, you're going to have more teams producing more players. And, you know, when you do the maths, that's a matter of fact. That's not. You also have the amount of my buddies that were moving to Dublin to play sport, to work more so than play sport. But as a result, now they're having kids. You know what I mean? And they're all of a sudden now going to be living and playing in teams from Dublin. So there's that part of it. I always felt that, you know, and when I was playing for Ireland, the best team for Ireland was picked. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was the way I always felt about it. You know, you want to be playing with the best guys. If that meant 24 Munster players or 24 Leinster players, I always felt that the best thing that had to be done was pick the best team. You know what I mean? Give us the best chance to win. And look, there's arguments, of course, to be made, but I always felt that was the case.
Great. Last part. This about 8 days' time. Virgin Media TV are having you in. Punditry, there's a bit of chat. You could be Roy Keane or George Hook or somewhere in between. Peter, what do you think? The new version.
I'm going to be Peter O'Mahony is what I'm going to be. You know what I mean? I'm going to be myself. I'm looking forward to. I never thought I'd see myself there. You know, when I was in the player that you spoke about, you know, going to interview, I could never see it. But, you know, I'm going to enjoy, you know, giving my side of it, giving my opinion. You know, there's definitely an allure to be talking about rugby alongside someone like Conor, Rob, you know, guys who are very recently retired and have, I think, a really strong opinion on the game, and a really good opinion. You know, Joe obviously is very impressive, to be fair, and has been a guy who I didn't follow a lot of the stuff, but seems to talk a lot of sense and make a lot of sense. So I'm looking forward to giving my opinion. You know, from a recently retired player's point of view, I think it's good to hear opinions like that, fresh. You know, hopefully I can give a few insights. I won't be giving any secrets, but at the same time, you know, you have to give your opinion and talk about a sense, hopefully.
Be great to have a forward on the panel. You say no secrets, but you're there to be Peter O'Mahony and give the insight. Analytical, is that the way you'll go, or a bit off the fence as well? And why do you think you have changed your tune, as in now you think maybe it's a good idea to go in front of the screen, which is great to have you?
I think I have an opinion that people will be interested in. You know, I think with the way rugby's been very successful, you know, people's expectations have gone to a certain level in Ireland. I think at times we need to have a check on that. There's stuff like the social media side of it that I don't find that people actually realise, you know, how personal it can be.
Did you struggle with that?
No, I didn't. I was lucky. Didn't have any interest in coming across it, but I've seen guys at the coalface who have struggled with it, and at times it's hard to get away from. And I'd like to have an opinion on that. You know, even the like, you know, I know how the guys feel on today. You know what I mean? You're travelling home. I've been there and done that, and you know, I'd love to think that before some people write stuff on Twitter or Facebook or Bebo or wherever they're operating on, that they
Bebo, Peter,
or whatever it's called, that they have a good think about what they put
MySpace.
down, because a lot of the time it's going straight to that fella's phone, you know, and you know, can be very tough, particularly for younger guys. You know what I mean? So, you know, I've opinions on that kind of stuff that I'd like to get out there, and you know, I enjoy watching rugby. I love supporting Ireland, and that'll never change. So, hopefully, people will have some sort of interest in it.
They certainly will. And lastly, a two-parter. What's Peter O'Mahony most looking forward to in the future? And is this Ireland team good enough to get the semi-final or final in the next World Cup?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before then. I'm very, very, very hopeful that I'll see an Irish team in get to a further point than they've ever got to in a World Cup. I think there's certainly the ability in that squad if they get a few things right to do that. Looking forward, I've never been one to look too far down the line. I like to be, you know, people talk about being in the moment. You know, of course you plan, but you know, you could spend your life you could spend your whole time wishing your life away. You know what I mean? I'm enjoying my time at the moment. I'm enjoying spending time at home, as I said. I'm enjoying getting back busy, getting stuck into projects that I'm looking forward to and have an interest in, and you know, the future will bring what the future brings.
Peter, you've replaced Alan Quinlan very well, and thank you so much.
Very much.
That
Thanks
was
for having
brilliant.
me. Cheers. Thank you.